Have you ever wondered about the tabernacle? You know, that incredible, portable, holy tent that God told Moses to build way out in the desert? It was meant to be a physical place for his actual presence to live on earth. So today, we're going to open up the blueprints and look at every single piece.
And it really all boils down to this one powerful verse from Exodus. See, this wasn't just about building a fancy place for people to worship. The whole point, the entire mission, was God's plan to literally live right there, in the middle of his people.
But, this created a huge problem, right? I mean, think back to the Garden of Eden. Humanity was kicked out, totally separated from God's presence, with the way back guarded by these powerful angelic beings called cherubim. So the question was massive. How could a perfectly pure and holy God possibly set up his home right next to a flawed, imperfect nation? Well, the tabernacle is the answer.
Okay, before we get into the actual design, we got to get one thing straight, the measurements. You're going to hear the word cubit a lot. Just think of it as about 1.5 feet, or around 45 centimeters. Keep that in your head because the precision of this whole structure is absolutely central to the story. Now, this design wasn't just dreamed up by some clever architect in the desert. No way. God specifically told Moses to build every single thing according to a pattern that he showed him up on Mount Sinai. So what they were building on earth was actually a copy, a physical model of a real heavenly place. All right, let's start our tour from the outside and work our way in. We begin at the outer court. For any regular Israelite, this was it. This was the first point of contact, the public space where the journey towards God's presence had to begin. And it was a huge, clearly defined space. The dimensions were exactly 100 cubits long by 50 cubits wide. We're talking roughly 150 feet by 75 feet. So right away, you have this very clear boundary between the ordinary, everyday camp and this new holy ground.
And get this. The fence itself was made of this beautiful, fine-twined linen, held up by pillars that were set in these heavy brass sockets. But notice the detail, because it's everything. The little hooks and the bands holding it all together, they were made of silver. Every single material was chosen for a very specific reason. The moment you stepped inside that courtyard, you were confronted by the first and, frankly, the most dominant thing there, the altar of burnt offering. It was this massive wooden structure, but it was covered completely in brass. This was the place of sacrifice, and its message was impossible to miss. The only way to even begin to approach a holy God is through dealing with sin. And right here, we see this really crucial transition happening. As you move from the outer court towards the holy place, the main metal switches from brass to gold. Biblically, brass often represents judgment, while gold is all about divinity, holiness, and purity. This isn't an accident. This change in materials shows you the journey from dealing with judgment outside to entering a place of divine holiness inside. Okay, so now let's step inside the tent itself, into what was called the holy place. Now, this was a restricted area. Only the priests could come in here to do their daily duties. This was a place of service, a place of fellowship with God.
The walls weren't just fabric, they were solid boards of acacia wood, but they were completely covered in pure gold. The whole structure was held together with golden rings and golden bars. I mean, can you just imagine what that looked like? An entire room just glowing with this warm, radiant gold.
And if you looked up, the ceiling, the innermost layer of curtains was just breathtaking. It was woven from fine linen with 3 very specific symbolic colors: blue for the heavens, purple for royalty, and scarlet for sacrifice. And get this, woven right into the fabric itself were the figures of cherubim.
And this is so, so important. These were not just pretty decorations. The cherubim, the exact same kind of beings who guarded the way back to Eden, were now symbolically woven into the very fabric of God's house. It was a constant, powerful reminder that you were entering a guarded, heavenly space. This was a little piece of heaven on earth.
But even inside this incredible golden room, there was another division, an even more sacred barrier. We've now come to the veil, the curtain that separated the holy place from the most holy place. This veil was this thick, heavy curtain, and it was made of the exact same materials as the ceiling: blue, purple, scarlet, and fine linen, with those cherubim intricately woven into it. It was like one final guarded barrier to the very presence of God himself. Its purpose was critical, to separate the physical manifestation of God's glory from, well, from literally everyone and everyone else. The separation was absolute. Only one person, the high priest, was ever allowed to go past it, and only on one single day of the year, the Day of Atonement. That's it. So we finally arrive behind the veil in the most holy place, the absolute epicenter of God's presence on earth. And in here, there was only one single piece of furniture, the Ark of the Covenant. Just think about that for a second. What would you expect to find at the very heart of God's throne room on earth? What object could possibly be holy enough for the space, the spot where God's glory would physically appear?
It was this, a surprisingly small and very precisely measured chest. 2.5 cubits long by 1.5 cubits wide and high. That's just under 4 feet long. Not some massive, imposing throne, but a small, intricate golden box. And just look at these details. The core was wood, but it was covered inside and out with pure gold. The lid, which was also pure gold, had a special name, the mercy seat. And then on top, hammered out of that same single piece of gold, were 2 cherubim. Their wings were stretched out over the mercy seat, and their faces were looking down towards it. And its purpose was spelled out perfectly. God himself told Moses, that exact spot, right above the mercy seat, right between the 2 golden cherubim, that's where he would meet with him. That's where he would speak. This small golden box was the direct point of communication between heaven and earth. So when you put it all together, you realize the tabernacle was so much more than just a tent. From that brass altar of judgment all the way to the golden mercy seat of communion, it was a physical, walkable parable, a really intricate, holy, and beautiful answer to that first big question of how God could possibly dwell among his people. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If this was the pattern, this incredibly elaborate blueprint that was required for God to make his presence accessible on earth, what does all that intricate detail, all those precious materials, and all those layers of separation, what does that tell us about the sheer intensity of God's holiness, and what it really takes to bridge that infinite gap between us and the divine?